if you go online or if you watch the news, there seems to be a pretty clear consensus that the average testosterone of the modern male has decreased over the years. It's almost like an epidemic of sorts. For whatever reason, we don't have the same testosterone that our fathers or our grandfathers had. There's a lot of different reasons people provide to kind of indicate why our testosterone is so low or what's going on. Is it the education? Is it the food? Is it the chemicals in the food? Is it our mindset? Is it our habits? Is it our behaviors? Who knows? I have my own 2 cents on why I think testosterone is decreasing, and I have my own opinions on how I think the modern male can keep their testosterone as high as possible. First of all, why am I making this video? One, because I keep seeing all of these different videos come up about testosterone. Now, personally, I get my blood work done pretty frequently. I get it done usually about every quarter or so. Right now I'm 30. Whenever I get my testosterone done, it is always exceedingly above average. Now, it's not insanely high. It's not over the top. I don't do steroids. I don't do anything crazy. But consistently, my testosterone's always in the 1000s. I think the last time I checked my testosterone, it was about 1300. And prior to that, I had been sick for a few months, and I checked at that time, it was about like high 900s. So in general, it's usually around the 1000 level. It's pretty, which from what I understand is much higher than the average testosterone. I think the average testosterone for men is usually around the range of, I think nowadays, it's about 300 to 600, depending on what study you look at or depending on who you ask. So I would say mine is significantly higher. It's actually, depending on what you look at, it's more than double the average male testosterone. And I have some reasons why I think that is, because it's consistent. And I don't think it's as much genetic for me as it is, I guess, a particular pattern of activities and behaviors that I do intentionally to make that happen. So in this video, I want to kind of give my take on how to keep your testosterone high, how to keep yourself healthy, and what I think you can actively do to increase your testosterone and keep it as high as possible. And I'm not going to use a bunch of research. I'm not going to use a bunch of articles. I have my own reasons for not doing that. But I will say that a lot of this is going to be anecdotal. Some people don't think anecdotal experience is useful or helpful. I disagree. I think anecdotal experience can be very helpful. So I'm going to give my 2 cents and explain why I think my testosterone is higher than average and what you can do in your own life to keep it that way, or what you can do in your own life to increase it. Now, I'm going to say, for the sake of this video, I'm going to start from the things that I think matter the least to the things that I personally think matter the most. I'm going to give my reasoning to why I think it ranks where it does. So, the first thing I want to get into, one of my suggestions to keep your testosterone high or to increase it is to use supplements. Now, specifically, I do recommend, there's about 4 supplements I do recommend to do this. The 4 supplements I recommend are magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, and boron. Now, I've experimented with these 4 different supplements for a few years now, and I will say, when I do take these supplements, I do feel a significant difference in the way I feel, the way I act. The way I feel overall improves when I take these 4 supplements. Now, out of the 4, I can't tell you specifically if they genuinely work or if I think they work due to the placebo effect, which is why I rank this so low. Because to be honest, I don't think the supplements in themselves help that much. I think they help a little bit, but not that much. Out of all the supplements on that list that I just mentioned, the one that I think matters the most is vitamin D. Now, as far as vitamin D, most people are pretty deficient in vitamin C, especially if you're African American. You're going to find that a lot of people, according to statistics, according to data, are lacking in vitamin D. In general, I think the reason why so many people are so deficient in vitamin D is because the modern world, in a sense, forces you into a bit of a bubble. It forces you to kind of stay inside. It forces you to avoid vitamin D. I think this lack of access to natural vitamin D is sort of what keeps people so, I don't know, like I've had times in my own life where I haven't gone out for days and you kind of feel lethargic, you don't feel motivated, you don't feel energetic. And then the moment you get outside, I know this for a fact. I'll tell a story in just a second. I know for a fact, whenever I go outside and get some vitamin D for a significant period of time, I always feel exponentially better. Not even like a little bit better, a lot better, exponentially better. A few years ago, I had a company with a friend of mine, or I had a company with a partner of mine. The company was called Affinity, and I had a routine that I would do every single day. It's my favorite routine ever. Every single day, I'd wake up early, usually about 5 or 6 p.m., kind of just depended on how I felt. I'd go to the gym first thing in the morning, fasted. I'd come back home, shower. I'd usually sort of stretch, listen to a little bit of music, read a little bit, and then I'd always, every single day, go to this local coffee place. And I'd sit there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours outside, this is during the summer, and I would just drink coffee. I'd read a book, or if I had a course I wanted to take, I'd take the course, about 30 minutes or so of reading or taking a course, something for self-improvement. And I would start to do work. So if I had a project, or if I had to send out emails, or if I had to come up with like a landing page or whatever, design a Facebook ad, I would sit outside and I would do that for about an hour or so, usually until about 11 a.m. or so. Because usually about 11 a.m. people started to come to this coffee place. It was really a restaurant, but they had a coffee place kind of in the back of the restaurant. People would start to come out and they start to eat, and it get crowded. And that's usually when I would leave, once it started to get crowded. Now, this period, me doing that routine, made me feel the best I've ever felt in my entire life. And I would say the correlation right there, the thing that I think contributed the most to my positive feeling, was being outside in the sun. And I say this because I've experimented with this. When I go through a significant period of time of not being outside in the sun, it always, I don't know, it just pales in comparison to those days where I get to actually be outside for a significant period of time. So again, I think one of the things that will help you increase your testosterone is just getting more vitamin D. Now, if you can't be outside, if you have a crazy schedule, or I don't know, you're in a situation where you work a lot, maybe 12 hours a day, and you're inside, or I don't know what it is in your own personal life. But for whatever reason, if you can't get actual vitamin D from the sun, from being outside, I recommend taking supplements. Now, as far as taking supplements, this is also something I've experimented with. Some people will say that you shouldn't take, I forget the exact amount. There's a certain amount, if you kind of go by the serving size of most vitamin D supplement kind of containers, they give a recommended amount. This is gonna sound, I guess, a bit strange, and I recommend you talk to a doctor first or do your own research, but I always go above what the recommended dosage is. I think it's like IU, it's like something IUs or something like that. In the past, I'll put it this way. For example, if I got a vitamin D container and it said to take 3 pills to reach the daily recommended amount, if I took 3, I felt okay. If I took 6, I feel amazing. Every day I take 6. And I know if you take too much vitamin D, the whole idea is that you'll get a bit of poisoning or some kind of toxicity from the vitamin D. I have never found that to be true for me. Obviously, don't take like 20 if it says take 3 or take 2. I would take a little bit more than suggested. So I would take like double. If it said 3, I take like 6. I found that that's helped my mood significantly. And I think that mood increase is attributed to a testosterone increase. Once again, I can't say for sure if me taking that extra vitamin D actively increased my testosterone, but I do think it had an impact. And the reason why I say this is because I truly believe you can feel when your testosterone is low. Like if your testosterone reaches a certain point and starts to drop or starts to increase, I feel like you can just genuinely feel it in your body. I can't really explain it. I'm not sure if this is how it is for everyone. I imagine it is true for, at least for men. But you do feel a response from higher testosterone or low testosterone. The days when I've gone to get tested and my testosterone felt low, it would show on my lab results. Like I'd feel like, oh, my testosterone's gonna come back low, and my lab results would show it. It's still higher than average, but it'd be like 800 or 900 or something like that. And then the days where I'm like, oh, I feel really good. I've been feeling so good lately. My testosterone's gonna be so high. It'd come back at like 1300 or 1200. I don't think that's like a coincidence. I think you can feel your testosterone increase or decrease. And taking vitamin D supplements and being out in the sun more always made me feel like my testosterone was way higher. Your sex drive increases, your motivation increases, your desire to just perform more and do more and become more in your own life increases. So, but this is the bottom of what I think is most important. I'm gonna shortly get into things that I think are far more important that you can actively do. This is not stuff that you can passively do. These are not things that I think you need to rely on genetics for, because that's useless. If you have a natural genetic predisposition to have low testosterone, then me talking about what you can do doesn't really matter, unless you take like steroids or some kind of injections or something, which I do not recommend. I want to talk about things that you can actively do to increase your testosterone. So that's the first thing. Take supplements, specifically vitamin D. I think vitamin D will be the biggest thing, the biggest contributor to your testosterone increasing. By the way, sorry about the cars. I wanted to shoot this video. On a side note, I'm trying to shoot more content for you guys. And I'm trying to build a studio, but my studio's not ready yet because I need lights. And the studio itself is actually, I was testing it the other day, the studio itself is super dim. It's like so dim. So me, of course, being the dark brown skinned gentleman that I am, you can't see anything. It's like pitch black. So I need lights. So I'm out here in the sunlight. Plus I feel like it kills two birds, one stone. I get that vitamin D. And get to shoot some content. So that's why I'm out here. But yeah, so back to the video. Yeah, I would say the second thing that you need to consider to increase your testosterone is how much you're sleeping. Now you're probably sitting there wondering, why did I rank sleep so low on the list? Why do I prioritize it so little compared to everything else that I'm gonna bring up? And it's not that I don't think sleep is important. I do think sleep is vital. I think you absolutely need sleep. But my issue with sleep is that I think the research on sleep is not good. I think it could be a lot better, and I think it's not precise enough for most people. And I'll give you an example. When I was in college, I remember there were all these studies coming out saying that, actually, let me backtrack even more. When I was in high school, there were studies saying that you need at least 9 hours of sleep as an adult. It was like 8 to 9 hours of sleep as an adult. And I've seen some articles that suggested possibly more. I would try it. I try to get 8 hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep, 10 hours of sleep, and I never felt good. Like I'd sleep for 8 hours and then I'd wake up still feeling exhausted. And at some point I was like, why am I still feeling sleepy even though I've gotten 8 hours of sleep? Now some people might say, oh, well the sleep wasn't quality sleep. You weren't getting 8 hours of quality sleep. You're only getting like maybe 2 hours of quality sleep. That could be true. But then I'd have to question, well, if I get 8 hours of if I sleep for 8 hours and 2 of them are quality hours, but then I also sleep for 10, 11, 12 hours and it still feels the exact same, perhaps the length of time I'm sleeping is not conducive to awakefulness. Is that a word? Do you understand what I mean? Like the amount of time I'm sleeping does not correlate to feeling alert or feeling awake or mental health. So I would experiment with this. I'd try to sleep about 4 hours a night, then 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. I'd be all over the place, but I would track it. In college, I started to see research saying that you need about 6 to 8 hours of sleep, and anything more than that could actually be detrimental. This excess of sleep being detrimental, to me, explained why when I slept a lot, I felt worse. But it was still a weird bit of data to say 6 to 8 hours of sleep. It's not a precise number. It's a bit of a range. Now, me personally, and this is just my opinion on sleep, and this attributes to everything where people say you need X amount of sleep. I think the amount of sleep you need is based on your own biology, and I think you have to test out what makes you feel the best. I think some people need 10 hours of sleep. I think some people need 12 hours of sleep. I think some people need 5 hours of sleep. I think some people need 4 hours of sleep, and I think some people need 6 hours of sleep. I don't think there's any specific definitive amount of time that every single human should be sleeping to be at their peak alertness, be at their peak mental state, to be at their peak ability to gain muscle. I think it just depends on the individual. So I rank this so low, sleep, not because I don't think sleep is important, but because to give a specific number is too difficult to do. And I think you'll have to experiment with what works best for you. Does that make sense? So get more sleep or less sleep, but experiment with how much sleep you need. But understand that sleep does help with your testosterone functioning. Once again, I genuinely feel like you can feel when your testosterone increases or decreases. And I've had tons of times where I didn't get much sleep, and after a certain period of time of say getting like 8 hours of sleep every single night, I felt my testosterone decrease. Now me personally, I think 5 to 6.5 hours is like the perfect range for me. If I get less than like 5 hours, I feel groggy all day, I don't feel good, I feel low energy, I don't feel productive, I don't want to do anything, I just feel lethargic. If I get more than like 6.5 hours, I feel the exact same way. That 5 to 6.5 hour range to me is like the peak. Like that's the perfect amount of sleep. I wake up, I feel refreshed, I feel ready to go. I feel super motivated, super energized, super alert. You have to figure out what works best for you. You have to figure out the range of time that makes the most sense to you. And that's why I rank it so low on the list. Get sleep, but experiment with how much sleep you need. Now, I'm gonna say that number 3 on my list is gonna be a bit controversial because I think it stands in the face of what most scientists or what most standard research or general knowledge would suggest. Number 3 on my list is be careful of your diet. Now, I think the reason why this is going to be controversial is going to be controversial for a few reasons, but I think one of them is because you're probably thinking, why are you ranking diet so low? Isn't diet the thing that is truly hurting male testosterone these days? I believe the answer is yes and no, and I'm going to explain why in just a second. I think to a degree, I'll say this, people get really freaked out over hyperfiltrating their water, over BPAs, over certain chemicals in the foods, like eating soy, for example, or all kinds of things. There are a lot of reasons why people get really upset with the different foods that they're consuming, and I totally understand that. But my belief when it comes to diet is that as long as you maintain a healthy, relatively healthy diet, a lot of the things people are most afraid of aren't that significant. When people freak out about drinking water out of a plastic bottle, while I do think it's impactful and I do think it can hurt in the long run, I think in general, it's not that big of a deal. And I say this, here's my reason for this, and you might disagree. There are tons of people with testosterone far above the average that continue to drink water from water bottles. They have been drinking from water bottles and they'll continue to drink from water bottles their entire lives. And their testosterone is still high. The people that are cited, maybe some of your parents or grandparents that have been cited to have such high testosterone, I imagine they probably also drank from water bottles, and they probably had their bottles go through the exact same process or a very similar process, or maybe even a more hazardous process than the bottles we have today. So my belief is that the diet in itself, or those little things like avoiding BPAs and all that stuff, it's not as important as people make it out to be. I'm not saying it's not important, but I am saying it's that your testosterone is not going to decrease by 500 points or 400 points or anything substantial because you drink out of a water bottle consistently. Does that make sense? So that's my belief on this, and this is why I'm putting diet where it is. Now, do I think you need to maintain a healthy diet? Yes, absolutely. Do I think you need to eat healthy foods like eggs, things with healthy cholesterol, things that aren't saturated in tons of chemicals? I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Yes, of course. Don't eat shit. It's pretty much the point. Don't eat shit, don't eat garbage. Or at the very least, don't eat it super consistently. Have some moderation with the diet that you have. But you eating McDonald's every once in a while, I don't think it's gonna turn you into a chick, is the point that I'm trying to make. You eating tofu, or you eating soy, or you eating sushi will not make you into a high estrogen girl. You not eating, say, eggs every single day will not make that much of an impact. Or perhaps if you do eat eggs every single day, I don't think that alone is going to make the biggest impact on your testosterone. It might increase it a little bit, but it's not going to give you like 2,000 testosterone or 1,000 testosterone or whatever the way they measure testosterone. It's not going to work that way. This is just my personal belief. So while I do think it's good to have a healthy diet, I don't think diet in itself is going to be the thing that's really going to be the 80% indicator of positive testosterone, of high testosterone. This is the way I like to think about things. I like to think about everything as far as kind of in terms of a Pareto coefficient. There are some things that attribute to 80% of results, and there are some things that attribute to 20% of your results. I think diet is somewhere in the middle. Obviously, it doesn't have to be 80-20 exactly. I think diet's more of that center line. It attributes enough to your testosterone, but it's not the main thing. It's not really going to be in that 80% category. It's going to be more in like that 20 or 30 or 40% category. Do you understand that? So yes, focus on your diet. Make sure you're having a good diet. Make sure you're eating healthy. Make sure you're eating high quality foods, grass-fed foods if possible, lots of healthy meats, lots of healthy fats. But don't stress out a lot if one day you eat tofu or soy. You will not die from eating one, soy or tofu once in a while. You will not suddenly turn into a girl. I don't think you're going to suddenly grow boobs or tits or whatever. You're not going to have a vagina if you eat a little bit of estrogen producing foods every once in a while. I do not think it works that way. So that is why I put diet so low on the list. Now, this next one, this is something that I've never heard. Well, I shouldn't say never. I think recently I've been hearing podcasts by Andrew Huberman. He's been saying this. Not exactly the way I'm going to present it, but I've heard him say things similar to this. And I very rarely, I rarely hear people talk about this, which is why I feel like it's necessary to bring this up. One of the things that I think will kill your testosterone more than anything else is comfort. And this is the thing that I truly think, this is one of the big reasons why I think most people in the modern era, most males at least, lack high testosterone. My belief is that we all have low testosterone, or I shouldn't say we, because I don't. My testosterone is great. A lot of other people have low testosterone because they're too comfortable. They don't have anything making them struggle in life. And I know that sounds weird to think, why would you want to struggle? I don't think you necessarily want to just have pointless struggles, because there are struggles that aren't necessary. Like, for example, if you live in a foreign country, you might struggle to get food or water every day. I'm not saying that it's unnecessary in the sense that it doesn't exist. I'm saying it's unnecessary in the sense that if you don't have to struggle that way, I see no point in struggling that way. Does that make sense? So if you live in a first world country that's developed, you don't need to go days without water and food. Maybe it's a personal challenge, sure, you can do that, but it's a struggle that doesn't offer many benefits relative to the downsides. Hopefully that all makes sense. But my fundamental belief is that most people are truly too comfortable, especially in the Western world, which is where I think this whole low testosterone epidemic is occurring in the Western world. I think about I like to read history books. I like to think about how people used to be in the past. Recently, I read about Napoleon. I read about World War II. You think about the struggles that men went through back then, significantly higher than anything we go through now. In the modern era, if you want to watch TV, you don't even have to stand up to turn on the TV. I remember when I was a kid, you'd have to actually get up to turn on the TV. Nowadays, the remote's there. You can use your phone. Your phone has TV if the actual TV itself doesn't work, because you can watch Netflix or YouTube on your phone. If you want to eat, you don't have to actually get out of your house to go anywhere. You don't have to hunt. You don't have to go hungry. Everything you want is available to you 24/7 at the push of a button. This generation of men are the most comfortable any male has ever been in the entire history of Earth. Does that make sense to you? Does that not blow your mind? The average man now, even a man that is low income, lives significantly better than a king would in the past. Think about that for a second. You're at home, you might be complaining about how difficult life is. Your life right now, the way it is, even if you're complaining, is significantly better than a king's life 100 years ago or several hundred years ago. That should be mind-blowing to me. To me, that is the most stunning thing ever. Just how comfortable we've become. And I think that comfort is truly what contributes to the low testosterone. I remember in college, I would see research and I would see data and articles that male testosterone begins to decrease around the age of 26 or 27. And it continues to decrease a little every year from that point on. And at first I accepted that. But then I thought about it, and I would see some people in their 30s and 40s that still seem to have extremely high testosterone. Now, of course, I didn't do any blood work on them. Of course, I didn't test them. So I don't know exactly what their testosterone was. But I do think there are certain traits, there are certain attributes that men exhibit when they have higher testosterone. I do think that's fundamentally fact. And these men that were in their 30s or 40s or 50s still had those traits. Sure, they could be on TRT or some kind of testosterone or some kind of steroids. Sure, it could be the case. But a lot of them I don't think were. A lot of them I think were just naturally high testosterone. But what I noticed is that their behaviors were significantly different. They would exercise more frequently. And I'm going to talk about that in a second in one of the points that I'm going to bring up soon. They would exercise more frequently. They would eat certain foods. They had a certain mindset for life. They had goals. They had ambitions. But there was one thing that stood out the most to me that separated them from everyone else. I think the thing that separated them from everyone else the most is that they didn't spend too much time with their girlfriends. And I know that's going to sound controversial. I know that's going to sound weird. People are going to say, what do you mean they didn't spend time with their girlfriends? I think, this is just my personal belief. This is an observation that I've had. I've noticed that literally 99% of the male friends I've had, once they get a long-term girlfriend, they all begin to gain weight. They all begin to fall off the habits and routines that kept them in good shape. Some people might say, oh, well, it's because they're getting older that their testosterone is going down or they're gaining weight. Because you're older, your metabolism decreases. I don't think age is the cause. I think age is a correlation. I think what really happens is that as you get older, you start to, in general, decrease in your ambition. And I think at that point, and I'm not saying all men do this, I think a lot of men do this because they didn't accomplish whatever goals they wanted to accomplish by the age of, say, 26, 27, 28. So they begin to settle in life. Maybe they got a job and they're getting paid a decent amount, so they feel comfortable. Maybe things are okay in their lives. They're living out the status quo. Maybe, they're not being challenged the way they used to be. Maybe in college, the objective was to get a good job, get a good career so you can have a wife or have a girlfriend or whatever. And then as they get older, they get to the age of 26, 27, 28. They finally get that career. They finally get that girlfriend. They finally have money coming in. And then they lose their ambitions. There's no longer a point to try to level up in life. And it's at that point that they start to gain weight and they start to get comfortable with their girlfriend. It's at that point that their testosterone starts to decrease. And I think the testosterone decreasing has nothing to do with their age or has little to do with their age. I think it has everything to do with their mindset towards life. Now, I'm going to sort of package the last few points, because I had about 2 or 3 more. I'm going to package them all together into one big point, because I think now it's relevant to talk about. What I really think is the cause of male testosterone decreasing so much is a lack of goals in life. It's a lack of long-term goals. It's a lack of vision for the future. I think in part of that is because, again, I mentioned this before, men are so comfortable nowadays that we get what we want too easily. The main things that men want in life, money, women, and status, are too easily achieved. It becomes a major factor in the decrease of male testosterone because you're comfortable. Because that's one of the main things that most men want in life. And once they get it, they sort of lose the ambition, or they sort of lose the reason to keep leveling up. I'm going to say this, and this is going to be a weird, controversial take. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. I think in a weird way, the idea of monogamy is a slight form of castration towards men. And I know that's a super controversial take. I understand that. And I'm not saying that men should cheat. I'm not saying that men should necessarily have different girlfriends or a lot of different girlfriends at once, a lot of different partners. But I thought about this recently. I do think that in a weird sense, the idea of a male committing himself to only one girl and shutting off the possibility of any other girl in itself is a form of castration. And the reason why I think that is because I think, biologically speaking, a part of what made a male even have testosterone in the first place was to compete with other men. And it was typically for the sake of, in the grand scheme of things, to reproduce. Men would compete for status to reproduce. Men would get money in the modern era, which is another form of status, to reproduce. Men would get muscles to defend themselves or to fight other men, ultimately to reproduce. When you eliminate reproduction as a goal because it's available, because it's consistent, because you can technically reproduce whenever you want, I think the body starts to decrease its testosterone naturally because it sees no reason to have that testosterone. Why do you need to divert resources to being competitive if competition is no longer necessary? You already got the girl, so what are you being competitive for? It's almost the same as a peacock. Imagine if all peacocks always had a partner, no matter how nice or beautiful their feathers are. I think biology would begin to eliminate the feathers. At the very least, I think they would just stay the same. There'd be no need for the feathers to look remarkable. There'd be no need for the feathers to look as beautiful as they are or to change in any way. So I think in the grand scheme of things, traits that we don't need as organisms, I think begin to get eliminated. And I think this is what happens to testosterone. Essentially, men are just too comfortable. And I know some people might sit there and think, well, what about the men that don't have partners? What about the men that don't have girlfriends, who don't have access to women? I would argue they do still have access to women. They have access to women in the form of pornography. Through pornography and OnlyFans, you don't have to be competitive. You can still have access to women without actually having access to women. Because I think deep down, your brain does not know the difference between you watching porn and doing your thing versus you actively going out, finding a girl, competing with other men for that girl, and doing your thing. Does that make sense? So, I know that's a big one. I know that's a very long point that I was on, but I think it's a major point to consider. And overall, to kind of summarize things up, because I know I was probably all over the place with that. A lot of people correlate age to a decline in testosterone. Let's see if I can go over here where it's sunnier. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think age in itself is the reason why testosterone decreases. I think coincidentally, around a certain age, men just start to settle because of societal pressures or just because of lifestyle. Maybe at that point you're establishing a career or a job. And I think that's what causes men to settle. I think that's the time when men start to find a long-term girlfriend. They start to have a stable income. And I think it's around that exact same time, once those boxes are checked, that men begin to have that decrease in testosterone because the body no longer needs to increase that testosterone. The body no longer needs to maintain that testosterone. So that is sort of just my belief on that point. I think that's a big one, but I don't think that's the most important one. Now, I think the next thing that you can do to keep your testosterone high or to increase your testosterone is to lift weights more frequently. Most men don't lift. Most men don't exercise. In fact, most people, and this is a sneak peek into the next point. Actually, I'm going to combine the 2 points together because I think they both kind of work in unison. Most men are overweight. Most men are obese. I think I saw a study recently. I keep trying to stay up to date with these studies, but one of the more recent studies I've seen, and this is probably about 2 months ago, I looked into this. I think about 60% of American males are overweight. 60% of American males are overweight. And I think out of that 60% group, about half of those men are obese. So pretty much most men are fat. Most men are fat, and if they're not just, and not many of them aren't just fat, many of them are obese. That is insane to me. I want to tell a quick story. Every year, I do a bulking phase. Usually every year, not every year, but for the most part, every year I do a bulking phase. And it tends to be, it's usually not like a slight bulking phase. It's usually a pretty good, like 4 to 5 month-long bulking phase. I usually gain a significant amount of body fat. I'm in a bulking phase right now. If you can't tell, my face is a bit more round than usual. Usually it's a lot slimmer or thinner. I don't have my six-pack abs. I'm a little bit of a gut, you can kind of see through the shirt. Kind of some man boobs sticking out. It's okay, it'll go away very soon. But I always do a bulking phase. And as I mentioned several times in this video, I think you can detect when your testosterone increases or decreases. Whenever I begin to gain body fat, my testosterone always decreases. I can feel it. I can feel that my motivation or my drive or my sex drive or whatever, it just all decreases. It doesn't go away, but it decreases. Whenever I start to get around 12 to 13% body fat, like lower end where you start to have visible abs, that is usually the point where I feel my testosterone increase. And it doesn't even increase a little bit, it tends to increase significantly. I always feel it every single time without fail. I actually now see it's crazy because now I actually start to look forward to it. So I'm currently right now, I was doing a bulk and I was going to go further with the bulk, but I was sitting there the other day and I was like, I miss that feeling of like being like super amped up, super competitive. Like I'm always in general like super competitive and kind of amped up, but I like that feeling of being like super amped up or super competitive or just super on it. So I was like, I need to get a cut. I got to cut down. Part of it too is I don't like looking too squishy. I'll put it that way. I don't like looking too squishy, but that's beyond the point. Lifting and having a lower body fat percentage will, in my personal opinion, increase your testosterone or help you maintain a healthy and high testosterone level. Most people do not work out. There's another study I saw recently, and I think they documented and they surveyed a bunch of people about their workout routines. And I think they found that only about 5% of people, all people, only about 5% of people actually go to the gym. And what they determine as go to the gym is physically go on a consistent basis of, I think, 3 days minimum per week. Out of the 5% that actually go to the gym, only about 1% actually have a routine in which they've seen changes in their physique. It was something like that. Like 1% of people actually have a routine in which they change. So basically most people go to the gym, they just waste time. Out of the few, most people don't go to the gym. The few that do go don't make progress. And there are only like a handful of people relative to the entire population that actually go to the gym and actually know how to create a successful routine, actually know how to gain weight when they want to gain weight or lose weight when they want to lose weight. There's only a small percentage of the population that can actually pull that off. But I think that statistic almost shines a light on why testosterone is the way it is. And I know I said it's the whole population. That does include women. But in this case, let's just extrapolate and let's think about the males. If most males don't even exercise, do you not think that might be a contributing factor to low testosterone? Again, I don't know if there's any specific studies linking exercise in itself to higher testosterone or lower testosterone. Perhaps there might be some people that do go to the gym consistently and they still have a very low testosterone, although I doubt that to be true. And again, this is anecdotal. In my own personal experience, when I do work out more consistently, when I do have a lower body fat percentage, that tends to be when my testosterone is higher and I can feel it. I think if you're watching this right now and you tend to have low testosterone, I think one of the best things you can do for yourself to increase your testosterone is to go out and have a workout routine. Get into the gym consistently. My recommendation is 3 to 5 times at minimum per week. Lift heavy weights and always be trying to increase the amount of weights you lift. You don't need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. You don't need to go insane and start lifting like 200 pounds in your bench press or your squats. I don't think that's necessary, but I do think that you need to have some sort of routine that includes progressive overload as a concept in that routine. Does that make sense? And if you don't know what progressive overload is, just real quick, this is not a fitness video. This is not a workout video, but just to explain what that concept is. Progressive overload is effectively you increasing the intensity of the workouts to always maximize muscle growth. It's basically the way it sounds. You're progressively overloading the muscles by increasing the weight, increasing the reps, increasing the sets, or decreasing the amount of time that you work out. Those are just a few ways to kind of utilize progressive overload. So you should be doing that. And I would imagine, again, anecdotal stuff, but I would imagine if you begin to do that, you do that consistently, I would give it at least 6 months. Check your testosterone before you begin, and then check it after 6 months. And I almost can guarantee you that you will see an increase in your testosterone. So now, I think the final thing that I think matters the most, it's one of the biggest contributing factors in my personal opinion that leads to the lack of testosterone in the modern male. And what I think it is I think most men lack long-term goals. I think most men nowadays, and I guess this ties into that idea of comfort that I mentioned earlier, but I think in the grand scheme of things, most men don't have any true significant long-term goals. Most of the men I listen to, most of the men I encounter, most of the men I see online most of the men I read about when I see Reddit posts or just different forums, most of their goals involve women. That is the goal, to get women. That, to me, is one of the most low quality, low testosterone producing goals you could have. Now, I know you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, didn't you just say a minute ago that the whole idea of monogamy and committing to just one girl and all that stuff is what leads to low testosterone? And my answer to that is yes. But I think the pursuit of women, or that mental idea of having many women, is just to create, it's to give you that feeling of a goal, but I don't think that should be the main goal. And the reason why I say this is because at some point, you're gonna find that if you, let's say for example, you do go out, you do create a goal, and the goal is to attract women. You're gonna find, one, you might be able to attract low quality women very easily. You probably could right now the way you are, go out to the bar, talk to about 20 girls, and one will say yes because she's too drunk, or she broke up with a boyfriend, or who knows, there's 1,000 reasons why. You might find that it might not even be that complicated to pull that off. But then once you do pull that off, what's next? Where does your goal, where does your life go from there? Will you feel happy? Will you feel content? Will you feel competitive? Will you feel energized? Will you feel motivated? And the answer is probably not. If you kind of go that route long enough, you won't feel motivated in the long run. And again, I think this is what really kills testosterone. I think most men don't have any significant goals to live for. And I think that lack of goal, that lack of ambition is what prevents people from really, I think, sort of having that long-term vision for yourself of the future. Having those long-term goals is really what keeps a guy motivated. It's really what keeps the testosterone high. As I mentioned earlier, I think there's a link between competitiveness and testosterone. I believe Andrew Huberman once said, I think I saw a podcast or some content that he put out, and he was basically saying that testosterone makes you, it gives you the sense that work is fun. It makes work exciting. It makes work worth doing. When I think about the people in history that I imagine had the highest testosterone, these were dudes and these were not people in their 20s. These were people in their, well, some were, but some people were in their 30s or 40s or 50s. These people had massive goals, and these goals did not stop at women, because once you get the girl, then the goal is complete. And I know there's always a different girl to theoretically get, but no matter how many girls you try to pursue, the goal is ultimately still the same. It's just to get the girl. And once you've gotten 3 girls, for example, getting the 4th girl is no longer that difficult. So the goal stops being worth pursuing. But if you have a big goal, let's say your goal is to become a millionaire, that's a substantially more difficult goal. And it's a goal that will energize you. Just think to yourself for a second. How many people do you know in your life that you would consider, like, do this test. I'm just curious, do this test. Think of all the people that you know personally in your own life, or all the people that you've seen maybe in movies, or maybe you kind of know them, but they're not like a close friend, but you kind of know of them. Think about what their testosterone level is, and think about what they speak about. Out of all the people that have high testosterone, or at least that you believe have a high testosterone level, do they talk about their goals or a long-term vision of the future? And out of all the people that you believe might have a low testosterone level, do they talk about the future? Do they talk about a long-term vision? Does that make sense? I think there's a correlation between a vision of the future, a long-term massive vision of the future. A mentor of mine once said, every male should have a big, massive, throbbing, veiny vision for the future. And I think that's fundamentally true. And I think that is one of the key things that most men lack in the modern era. They lack a big vision of their goals that is not limited to just getting laid. So that's sort of my 2 cents on this whole thing. Like I said, maybe you're gonna hate this video. Maybe you got a lot out of this video. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. My views are very anecdotal, and they're not based solely on scientific research. I do try to base it somewhat on research I've seen, but I do think that a lot of the research on testosterone and how it functions is a bit faulty. So this is why I'm making this video, to give my own 2 cents on what I think, based on my own personal experiences, will help you increase your testosterone or maintain a high testosterone level. So hopefully this video helped in some way. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought about it, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.